Oh hey, it's been a while since I uploaded anything. But forget about that for now. Because I got a medic balance ideas thing. You're watching it right now. So medic has this problem. At least I think it's a problem. Maybe other people don't. I would think they would. So medic has this problem that 2/3 of his loadout slots are completely dominated by one weapon. For each loadout slot, I mean. There's no super hybrid weapon that goes in multiple slots of one class. At least not yet. The Crusader's Crossbow is not only by far medic's best primary weapon, but it's arguably one of the most useful unlockable weapons in this game. And most of the time you'll probably see a medic using the Ubersaw as his melee. It's been that way for like a decade. The Crusader's Crossbow and the Ubersaw are really good weapons. There's not really a downside to using them. But here's another thing. Neither of them are necessarily overpowered, which makes things a little bit more difficult here. Medic balance is a little bit of a complicated thing, but let's give it a shot. The Crusader's Crossbow isn't a weapon I use all that often, because I guess I'm just too cool to use good weapons. But every time I use it, I'm like, why would I never not equip this? And then I just go back and use the Overdose again. So if your heal target has taken damage in the past 10 seconds, the stock medigun will heal them at a rate of 24 health per second. The Crusader's Crossbow heal amount scales from 75 at close range to 150 at long range. Meaning that even if someone is right next to you, it could be more beneficial to just shoot your teammate with a big old syringe instead of healing them with your medigun. It's not enough that the Crusader's Crossbow is the only primary that gives medic long-range healing, long-range attacking, the only one that reloads when not active, and the only medic primary capable of giving him Uber, but it also heals a large amount at close range. The syringe guns would need massive buffs to even come close to that. Now I think we'd all probably be okay with the stock syringe gun getting buffed, but how do you really do that? It's a stock weapon, so you can't really just slap a whole bunch of gimmicks onto it. Well, I guess you can. They did it with a flamethrower, but I mean, still. I genuinely can't really think of a syringe gun buff that'd make it even close to on par with the Crusader's Crossbow. The other two unlocks, maybe, because there's more to work with there. But as far as the crossbow goes, I think it would be fair to reduce the close range healing from 75 to 50. As long as you have a medic primary that can out-heal the medigun in its first second, there will probably never be another weapon worth using over it. At least without it being totally overpowered and gimmicky. But even this way though, the 50 health shot from the crossbow is still going to give about double what the medigun will in a second. Sure, I mean it'll have to reload afterwards, but all you have to do for that is just put it away. And 50 health near instantly on a teammate right in front of you isn't bad at all, it just makes it slightly less efficient at closer ranges. The Crusader's Crossbow is a weapon that basically does everything you want in a medic primary, but now it's slightly worse at one of those things. This is also gonna make it at least a little bit easier to try to balance the Blutsauger and the Overdose to be more worth using. Not that it would help all of that much. I don't ever see the crossbow as being anything less than medic's best primary unless it was absolutely nerfed into the ground. And I don't think anybody wants that. If you're playing medic to get stuff done, the Blutsauger probably isn't a weapon you're going to be using all that often. The biggest reason being that it's a weapon that needs to be active to get the bonus, but it has a passive downside. If you don't actively go around shooting people with the Blutsauger, you're only getting the regen penalty. So first off, I'm going to say change -2 health drain per second on wearer to no health regeneration when active. This will make it so that you regenerate the regular amount if you have your medigun or melee weapon out, but if you take the Blutsauger out, it'll end your self-regeneration completely. But we're not stopping there. Medic is a class made for helping out his teammates, right? Am I right? Is anyone going to answer no to that? I'm sure someone will. Okay, but anyway, the early beta version of the Overdose offered no speed bonus, but actually applied Mad Milk on hit. And at the time, I remember thinking that that was kind of crossing over into Blutsauger territory. It was basically just another health on hit syringe gun. It obviously didn't end up making it into the game like that, though they did end up adding it as a MVM upgrade. But basically where I'm going with this is you could replace the 3 health on hit on the Blutsauger with apply Mad Milk for 2 seconds on hit. This way it would actually be helpful for your teammates. This would make it so that the first syringe you land won't heal you, and if you don't hit someone again within 2 seconds, you also won't get any health back. But realistically, in most scenarios, this is better than the standard 3 health on hit. Then if you still want to encourage mechs to gain back health by actually shooting people, you could also add a penalty like -20% health from packs on wearer. So for example, this would mean that a large health pack would only heal 120 health instead of the regular 150. Which is noticeable, sure, but without a passive health regeneration penalty, it's not as big of a deal. This version of the Blutsauger can now help your teammates and doesn't have an impact on your health regeneration unless you're actively holding it, but it will also make you heal a little bit less from health packs. Overall though, it will generally be more beneficial for both the medic using it and his teammates. Up until the Meet Your Match update, the Overdose was possibly the blandest weapon in this game. It made you run slightly faster if you had high Ubercharge percentage, and it dealt very slightly less damage. And that's about it. Then they upped the max speed increase to +20% and increased the damage penalty from -10% to -15%. And it's decent. If the Crusader's Crossbow didn't exist, this would probably be the go-to. And kind of like the Blutsauger, I think it would be a good idea to try to give the Overdose a stat that would be more directly beneficial to Medic's teammates. And since the Overdose is a weapon based on speed, what if your heal target now gained up to plus 10% movement speed based on your Uber charge percentage? So for example, if you have 50% Uber, your target would now move 5% faster. Yeah, you get it. Then if it really needed a new downside, I think something like a minus 15% overheal build rate would probably work pretty well. Realistically, a max of 10% faster move speed isn't going to be a huge deal, but I do think it could be a pretty neat upside, and it would be fairly useful on mediguns with faster charges. It can allow you to bring a slow class like Heavy to the battle very slightly faster than he'd get there on his own, but that Heavy could also potentially have very slightly less overheal when he does get there. A new downside might not be entirely necessary. The speed boost could give you a very slight advantage in getting to mid first, but it still has the downside that it's not the Crusader's Crossbow. Most of the time, you won't see a whole lot of diversity in Medic's primary or melee choices because there are two really good options there. But when it comes to mediguns, while you do see all of them from time to time casually, half of them are banned in the standard competitive format. In 6v6, both the Quick Fix and the Vaccinator are not allowed. So the goal here, as it would be with any banned weapon, would be to try to get them to work well for both a competitive format and a casual one. And I guess I'll point out now that mediguns are arguably one of the harder things to try to balance for because of how big an impact Medic can have on the game. So these are just ideas, okay? But the nerfs to the Quick Fix and Meet Your Match were basically made because of how dominant that weapon was in the competitive beta. They ended up giving the match speed ability to all mediguns and reduced the Quick Fix's Uber charge rate from plus 25% to plus 10%. But what was probably more of a problem than the Uber fill speed was the Uber itself. It allows you to tank a ton of damage, and of course when you have fewer players, you won't be able to put out as much damage against it, especially without crits. The idea here isn't to make the Quick Fix worse. It was already bad enough for its first 2 years of existence. We don't want to go back to that. So I was thinking, what if we reduce the Uber charge effect from a 3 times heal rate to a 2 times 1, then increase the Uber charge rate back to plus 25%, and then added plus 25% Uber charge duration. Alright, first off, reducing the Uber heal rate is going to make it easier for groups of coordinated enemies to take on a Heavy or a Soldier, or whatever, who's being Ubered, but it's still going to heal very fast, just not as fast as before. And they're also going to gain that Uber significantly faster. As fast as pre-Meet Your Match Quick Fix, which is generally faster than the crit screen. Since, in case you didn't know, mediguns gain Uber slower on heal targets with full or close to full overheal. And since the Quick Fix never reaches full overheal on its own, the charge speed never gets decreased. And finally, that plus 25% Uber charge duration is going to give you an extra 2 seconds of charge, which is going to mainly allow you to switch patients and spread around the heals more efficiently. But you could also just use it on one patient if you really want to. I think this could bring the Quick Fix back a little bit closer to its original intention. Not necessarily a medigun made for making huge pushes or soaking up a ton of damage, but one for keeping everyone healthy and doing it quickly. Oh yeah, and one more thing, which is a bug, and I normally wouldn't cover bugs because, fix the bug. That's my idea. Good idea, right guys? But in the case of the Quick Fix, there's a semi-important bug that prevents players under the effects of the Quick Fix's Uber from blocking capture points from being captured. It's been that way since they made it so you can't actually cap points when you're Ubered, but if you're charged and physically standing on the point when enemies are also standing on that point, you can't block them from capping it. Which is dumb, and I'm pretty positive that's not intended. I actually tried emailing them about this, but I guess nobody saw it. Either way, it's something that should be changed. The Vaccinator is a medigun that I like. I think it's fun to use, but playing against it, maybe not as much. You can usually assume that the medic using it has at least one charge, and if they use it on your primary damage type, well then you're basically just useless for the next 2.5 seconds. But really I think the Vaccinator just kinda needs tweaking, mostly just adjustments to the stats that are there. Except, I'm gonna say add back a stat that was removed, the whole you're healed for 10% of the match incoming damage thing. Not that it was super useful after it was dropped from 25% to 10%, but I thought, it was kind of a nice bonus for matching the damage, and it's not like that stat could possibly work on any other medigun. And if anyone was confused for a while like I was, this stat was sorta supposed to be replaced with a slight Uber build on proper resist, at least according to the Tough Break patch notes. This never worked in-game and apparently isn't supposed to. It was just something they forgot to remove from the patch notes, I guess. Alright, so for the rest of them, get ready, there's a few. Reduce the overheal build rate penalty from minus 66% to minus 33%. Reduce the shield resistance effect from minus 75% to 66%. Reduce the base supercharge rate back down to plus 50%. And make it so that players under the effect of the shield cannot capture objectives. To start, the overheal penalty has been reduced significantly, but it is still also quite a bit slower than stock when it's overhealing. It's been reduced, but it still overheals noticeably slower. The Uber shields would now only block 2/3 of matched incoming damage instead of 3/4, which is still very good, on top of the better overheal rate, but you're still not blocking as much damage. The slower Uber charge rate, well, that's self-explanatory. It's still very fast, just not as fast. And finally, you will not be able to capture objectives with a shield. So you couldn't just stand on a capture point and soak up a whole bunch of rockets and then win. Possibly not something super noticeable and casual, but it could be pretty important competitively. And as a side note, this would now make the Crit Screed the only medigun that would allow you to cap under its Uber effects, which is all you really need to do there is probably just add it to the description, and I think that would be fine. But anyway, all these changes would overall make the Vaccinator shields worse, but now you wouldn't have to sit there for 6 minutes to overheal one patient, and you would also gain a little bit of health for matching the incoming damage. Hopefully this would make the Vaccinator potentially less annoying to fight, while also keeping it good and fun to use. Hopefully. Okay, I'm gonna push the Vita-Saw and the Ubersaw back and just do the Amputator first. Normally I do it in the order that they came out, but the order in this video has already been all out of whack, so this is fine. When the Tough Break update made it so that weapons like the Conqueror and the Cozy Camper's health regeneration amount decreased when damaged, then increased again over time, kind of like how Medic's regular health regeneration works, they also made it so that the Amputator's increased regeneration bonus decreased when you were damaged. So if you actually have the Amputator out and get damaged, instead of healing an additional 3 health per second, you'll only gain about 1. The difference between this weapon and something like the Camper is that you actually need to have the Amputator out to get the bonus. Make it so that the increase in health regeneration while active no longer decreases when you're recently damaged, and increase the overcharge gain through the taunt heal from 1% per 49 health heal to 1% per 25 health heal, which would make it almost double what it gives now. This way the health bonus works as it should, and you're rewarded more for using the taunt. A pretty simple way to make a somewhat mediocre weapon pretty good. The Solemn Vow is about the closest thing to a literal straight upgrade to any stock weapon other than the 3rd degree, and it was a straight upgrade until the gunmetal update slowed its firing speed by 10%, which was probably just so that it wasn't an upgrade over the Bonesaw. So maybe we could try to make the Solemn Vow a little bit more interesting and also give it a proper downside. We could change allows you to see enemy health to allows you and your heal target to see enemy health. And then we could add the downside, allows enemies to see your health and Uber charge percentage when you're damaged. If you take any amount of damage, an effect will appear above your head, which will show your health and your Uber percent. Sort of kind of like being marked for death, but it's just showing your health. Both teams will be able to see it, and it will last for about 5 seconds after you take damage. So this way your patient can now know who on the other team is hurt and who to potentially target, and maybe they could relay that information to other people on your team. And you, as the medic, don't necessarily need to get into the line of fire of the other team to get the benefit of the weapon, because your teammates can do that for you. But if you take damage, it basically puts a big target over your head that says, hey, go get this guy. The other team is usually going to try to take out the medic first, but if they know exactly how much health you have and whether or not you have Uber, it might make it easier for them to do so. The change the Vita-Saw got in Jungle Inferno was kind of a necessary one. As far as I know, this weapon has always been banned in every competitive format. And I didn't really think that they could make the Uber retained on death gimmick work, but I guess they did. Though the new version isn't really all that great. Kind of like the current Blutsauger, it has a downside whether you actually take it out or not, but you're only going to gain the upside if you actually hit someone. And let's say you manage to collect 4 organs, which would allow you to spawn with 60% charge. If you die with just 8% charge, that's all you're going to spawn with. Oh yeah, and also there's this thing called the Ubersaw. If you're actually going to go out and hit somebody, the Ubersaw gives you a large amount of Uber that you could use right now, in this very life that you're in. The Uber charge you gain from that could save your life, or it could even win you the game. And the Ubersaw also doesn't reduce your max health. The way I see it, you could do A, change the Vita-Saw's downside to something not passive, B, add a new upside, a second one, or C, make the organ mechanic do something else entirely. Or maybe some kind of combination of all of those. The idea for the Vita-Saw I ended up changing a bunch of times leading up to this video, but I kind of decided on a more boring solution, but I think it would probably help the best. Maybe. Add on-hit 15% Uber charge added, and then add a minor 10% damage penalty. This is kind of taking the eviction notice route of making a weapon better by sort of making it do something similar to another weapon. Like the eviction notice did, the gloves are running urgently, sorta. It's not as good, but there's also different upsides, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Instead of the Ubersaw's 25% Uber, you only get 15%, and it also does very slightly less damage, which could also allow you to get more charge out of them, but it's also going to make it very slightly harder to actually kill them. This also makes it so that if you hit someone and then immediately die after that, it doesn't matter how much charge you had because you're always going to spawn with at least 15%. And the Vita-Saw would also now have an upside that you can make use of in your current life. 15% Uber on hit ain't bad. And you can use that current life. Okay, in most scenarios, the Ubersaw is straight up better than the Bonesaw. It has a really good reward and a pretty minor downside. But it still requires Medic to put himself in at least a little bit of danger in order to get the benefit of the weapon. You still need to try to melee an enemy that will usually have better firepower than you. But again, if you do melee an enemy, the slower swing speed isn't really a huge deal, and the reward for doing so is pretty high. Does the Ubersaw need a nerf? No. Would I be entirely opposed to it getting one, if not just to encourage the usage of Medic's other melee weapons? Also, no. Well, that'd depend on what the change actually was. A pretty long time ago, they even tested 2 nerfs for the Ubersaw in TF2's closed beta back in 2009, but obviously neither of those were implemented. I would probably be okay with something like a 30% slower deploy. That would increase the time it takes to get the weapon out from half a second to 0.65 seconds, which is essentially the same as the base weapon switch time that all weapons had before the Tough Break update. And nobody would have called the Ubersaw bad back then. It's not going to be something that you can pull out quite as quickly and then crit that spy right in the face when he comes near you, but it's also not a slow deploy either. And this could even maybe make the Bonesaw actually worth using sometimes. If you want a weapon that can be pulled out in half a second and has no downsides, well, there you go. Realistically, I don't even think that this nerf would change the Ubersaw as the king of Medic's melee weapons. And I don't even think that it's a super necessary change either. As far as the priority of weapons in need of change in this game goes, I don't think the Ubersaw places very high. Well, somehow the class with the least weapons ended up being one of the longer one of these things. But yeah, Medic is sort of a complicated class, balance-wise at least. Especially when a lot of his weapons are just kinda obsolete, because there's better options. Speaking of which, if anyone has some super cool syringe gun buffs, those are ones I'd like to hear. I mean, it's kept me up at night, you know. How do you buff the syringe gun? I don't know. Maybe you could slightly up the ramp up and slightly reduce their reload, but that doesn't really fix any of the problems. It just makes it better for combat. Yeah. Anyway, next time, of course, is gonna be the sniper, which hopefully won't take so long. This video was supposed to come out in 2017. But it didn't. It's 2018 now. Either way, I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, dogs.